Hi everyone, Hans Christian Andersen here with Rhyme Signatures, the nerdiest music review this side of providing American animation studios with an extraordinarily wide selection of source material for decades now. And today we're going to be doing a review of the new Hamferð album, Met sHonderSterk. Over my years of listening to music, I've developed an almost fiendish addiction to collecting bands from the most unlikely or underrepresented countries I can find. From Andorra's Persephone to Vietnam's Haksan, from Tunisia's Myrath to Russia's Mechanical Poet. I've developed a sort of hedonistic glee to cataloguing these bands like rare Pokemon cards into my collection. So, imagine my delight when I got to add the Faroe Islands to my list, with the excellent and inevitably incorrectly pronounced Hamferð. This small island chain far to the north of Scotland and the west of Norway technically forms part of Denmark, although it is self-governed, and is honestly one of the last places I would have thought to look for a progressive doom metal band like this. But when one considers the isolation of this nation, the extremities of their weather, and the subsequently associated Nordic hardiness, perhaps the real surprise is that I've not heard of more bands from this archipelago in the northern Atlantic Ocean. Now, you will have to forgive my god-awful white British pronunciation of everything in this review, as the band does everything in their native tongue, so I've had to do a little bit of research to fully understand what the album is actually about. And it comes as little surprise to find that the subject matter is about as bleak and heavy as the music to be found within. The album's title translates as "But God's Hand is Strong" and focuses on the historical tale of a whaling boat accident in 1915 in which 14 men sadly perished. The album's title comes from a quote from one of the survivors, choosing to focus instead on the miracle of their survival rather than the tragedy of the lost. So, yes, all very cheerful stuff, but perfect fodder for this kind of dank, oppressive, wall of sound, doom-infused metal. And knowing the brass tacks of the narrative does help you form a greater understanding and appreciation of the music to be found within. So, who are Hamferð? This six-piece consists of Jon Aldara on vocals, Eiðunn Egil Hvanestien and Theodore Kapnes on guitars, Esmar Jonsson on keyboards, Isak Peterson on bass, and Remy Kofod Johannesson on drums. And this is their fourth studio LP to date. Now, when I started listening to this album, I couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity with the vocals, and it turns out that Aldara is the vocalist on two other bands that I'm already quite familiar with, that of Barren Earth and that of Iotun. Now, I'll be honest, I've never gelled particularly strongly with his vocals when taken in the context of either of these bands, but it turns out that when you put him in his native tongue and modulate his delivery with equal parts guttural growlings, savage barks, and agonised pain-infused cleans, you actually get, one of the best-sounding vocalists out there right now. Who knew? Yes, folks, the growled verse should not be put off from the early parts of this album. This record is about a 40-60 split, I guess, between growls and multiple stylistic shifting cleans, consisting of more aggressively delivered barks not dissimilar in attitude to the likes of Jorn Lander or Russell Allen, for example, and soaring, almost operatic crooning. Taken in isolation, each of these stylized vocals might be a little overwhelming across the course of an entire record, but Aldara's use of multiple different approaches is never exhausting and manages to pace itself excellently, always fitting the mood of the narrative structure of the music. And, man, what a structuring this album has! From moments of crushing, icy darkness of the ocean's waves coming to pulverise the listener with their brutal ferocity, to these passages of barely contained agony and despair, to sunlight-tinged hope amidst last-ditch desperation. The moods and themes explored on the album as they chronicle the emotions of what I can only assume is the poor individuals affected by the tragedy of the narrative is nothing short of heart-stopping in its intensity. Yes, folks, this album focuses on the extremities of this kind of music, but it manages to skirt the line between being utterly overwhelming in its approach, but never quite crossing the precipice into total oblivion. The band have captured the feeling and emotion of a tragic event and made it so effectively communicated, so rich and tangible in its atmosphere that even the language barrier doesn't prevent me from feeling the heartache at the central crux of the narrative presented to us. The guitars are crunchy, sludgy, and dank in all the right places. The drums are pounding and thunderous, the keys atmospheric and fearful, and the bass rich and textured, all adding up to make a sound that pounds at your temples with a throbbing pressure that is alleviated at just the right times by vocals that run the gamut from the depths of the darkest oceans to the top of the sun-kissed clouds. It's an intense experience, and one that manages to elicit some of the most visceral emotions in me from any music released this year so far. Now, I can't promise that this album will be for everyone, though. This is kind of hitting that very specific part of my musical lexicon, tickling my doom, sludge, death, and post-metal senses all at once, to create a sound that is so specific that it can only really scratch my desires when it's that kind of music that I'm looking for at any given moment. This cannot be described as a comfort album. This isn't a record I'm likely to return to over and over again, unlike some other stuff I've heard this year. Now, this doesn't mean in any way, shape or form that this isn't in contention for one of my favourite releases of the year. Much like the movie, Requiem for a Dream isn't inherently as rewatchable as The Princess Bride. It's unfair to compare Men sHonderSterk to similarly easily digestible releases of the year thus far. This is a bold, intense, strongly flavoured experience that really is kind of targeting a really specific niche, but for the niche it hits, it's honestly one of the best overall sounds and end results anyone could hope for. In truth, as much as I don't think this album will be an album for everyone, I still firmly believe that this could be another one of those transitory albums that helps people warm up to this style of music. There's enough going on here to be able to guide the novice to doom metal into an appreciation of the sounds within. It's the interplay between light and shade across the album's 44-minute length that makes this such an interesting and generally quite accessible listen. There's never, too much emphasis given to the darkness before it becomes overwhelming and uncomfortable, but similarly, we never stay long in the gorgeous, beautiful atmospherics before we're plunged back headfirst into the icy murk of the record's driving narrative theme. It's quite the rollercoaster across its length, but it's the way it segues effortlessly between these polar opposite moods that makes the album such a success in that regard. Now, the only real minor blemish on the album, and it really is more of a me problem than a genuine fault of the record, is the final track doesn't really land for me. Consisting of a spoken word vocal track across a delicate outro of minimalist music, one imagines that you really kinda need to understand Faroese for this track to hit hard. Now, the rest of the album that preceded this, the musical structuring, enables you to get the broad strokes of the narrative without the benefit of any linguistic comprehension, but this final track does feel like unless you speak the language, you will be missing out on the true emotional punch of the dying moments of the record. Now, it's still gorgeous, and the feeling that still comes across in the dialogue is still packed full of introspection and pain, but it just doesn't quite hit as hard as it otherwise could, leaving me slightly frustrated and with a sense of FOMO due to not really knowing what's being talked about. But, like I say, that's 100% a me issue, and it is not something that's fair to bear against the album as a negative. It's more of a be aware issue. It in no way takes away from how affecting the recording is overall, and if anything, it's made me want to do more research into translating the dialogue so I can fully understand and appreciate the final moments of what is otherwise nothing short of a modern masterpiece of the genre. So, what else can I say about Hamferð's Men sHonderSterk? This one is another record that lay outside of my usual listening habits. Doom metal like this tends to be the sort of music I listen to maybe, once a week or so, when I'm in a particular kind of mood for this sort of experience. But it was clear to me while listening that this was a very special album, and one that I feel even peripheral or maybe even non-fans of the genre could easily open up to. The long-form stretches of clean vocals and passages of atmospheric and delicate instrumentation as opposed to the usual dank, brooding, despair-laden stylings that are so commonly attributed to the genre makes this for an album that is easy to recommend to people who like reaching outside of their usual musical habits. Anyone who's enjoyed Iotun or Barren Earth will probably appreciate hearing John Aldera in a different context as he explores and demonstrates an absolutely incredible range across the album's runtime, and anyone who's not familiar with him will be left with the impression that they are hearing one of the true greatest vocalists in modern metal. The band swelling and rising behind him are glorious in their abilities, both from a technical point of view as well as an artistic one, and the sum of the parts of everyone working together makes for a near-forgettable experience overall. I cannot recommend enough that you pick up a physical copy of this one. Spring may be here at last, but sHonderSterk throws out one last wintry knockout blow with one of the most crushing and affecting albums of the year. This is all, of course, guys, just my opinion, as you know, so if you have listened to this one, please tell me what you thought about the record in the comments down there. If you did like this video, please do give it a thumb. Please do share it around with anyone else you think could possibly enjoy it. And as always, do please consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. My link tree is going to be left down below as usual, where you'll find all the various places to find me on social media, so please do hit me up, drop me a follow, if you want to see more about my daily life and adventures outside of YouTube. But until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures pretty odd.